Maybe you're sharing a little tidbit from your day.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even have to be necessarily just about your writing. It can be about what's going on in your day-to-day life. I mean, I write emails about emails.
Yeah. And you still have things to say, right?
And, like, I don't just write about the act of email marketing automation. I bring in a way that feels comfortable for me, like,
Yeah.
talk about some things going on in my life, because that's the other thing I think sometimes people think, "Oh, I'm writing a newsletter. I have to share all this personal information," and you absolutely do not.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright. And this week on the show, we have
Bev Feldman.
Yes, we do. It's a great episode.
Yep. We talked to her about all things email. She's very good at segmenting and figuring out how to make your emails more personal, like customizing them sort of for your different segments that you have. Yeah. So we've talked about that. And we ask her lots of the questions that we hear about, like, should we include images or not? And common mistakes she sees. So that is coming up.
Yeah, it was great. So what's been going on with you?
Well, I'm doing all my edits now to the letters. So those are almost done. And I'm looking into, I know. And this is actually the fun part, because once I get through the editing, then at the same time, I'm looking around for people to illustrate it.
Yeah.
And I've got some ideas, and that's the thing that I used AI for last week that I told you about, to create a artist brief. So I thought I need to hold off on that until I'm actually done with them, so I know exactly what I need.
Right.
Because I think that's part of the problem with us authors. We're like, hey, I want to get some illustrations, but we don't really know how many we want or exactly what size and what they need to feature. So I'm figuring all that out.
Right.
And yeah, that is about it. In personal life stuff, we are going to do some stuff to our house. We have a flagstone path, and we're going to get it's starting to break up. So we're going to have that taken out and put in a brick path instead to the front door.
Yeah.
But of course, that you have to apply to the HOA. You have to get bids. And so, like, I spent so much time on that yesterday. I spent like an hour completing our package to go to the HOA.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Welcome to suburban living. Yeah.
I got done and I thought, the phrase, I love my HOA, is said by no one ever.
Never, ever. Oh my gosh.
So what about you? What's going on?
Well, I have been, what is today? Wednesday?
Today's Wednesday. So it's today's the day after the JFK files came out. So if anybody is a thriller writer, I'm sure they are downloading documents.
Yeah. So today's Wednesday. This week has been pretty good. Pretty good. I've written on this story. I have tried dictation.
Ooh.
And it went pretty well. And let me tell you what I did. Now, don't come at me, y'all. You know I'm fragile. But so I started trying to do it with the quotations and everything. And I just can't. I mean, like, I can barely write those things. I certainly can't think them. And so I just did it. I just said it. I used dialogue and everything, but I didn't put
just kind of stream of consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, but like, he says something and then he moves to the door, or he moves to the door and says something or whatever. But then I took it and I did run it through Claude AI and just ask it to fix the grammar and put in the punctuations. And add punctuation, including quotation marks.
There
and y'all, I was shook at how good it was. Shook.
Were you just like amazed? Like, oh my goodness, that saved you so much time.
Two mistakes. I mean, mistakes being they put two lines together. Yeah, 2 lines together. 2 of those. Only
That's
two
amazing.
in about 700 words.
That's excellent.
I was really impressed and shook. And so I put that in my document, and then I went in and,
Worked on it.
added to
Yeah.
and,
Mhm.
uh, fixed just my mistakes and
Mhm.
not AI's mistakes, and so
Yeah.
that is something to think about if you're gonna do
Mhm.
dictation, and I just dictated into
Your
the
phone. Yeah.
yeah, my phone, I have a recording app on my phone,
Mhm.
and then it creates a transcript, and then I emailed
Mhm.
that transcript to myself, and
Mhm.
I'm sure there's
Yeah.
an easier way, but that was
Well,
how
that works, and then I think I've heard somebody I can't remember who it was, say that they use their notes app
yeah, I
on
heard somebody
iPhone.
saying that too. I just been notes always give me a little trouble. I lose things
Yeah.
in there,
So
and so
then don't use notes.
yeah, I'm not wanting to do that. But
Whatever works best, yeah.
yeah, so anyway, that went real well.
That's exciting, though.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, is it great? No, but I can go back and
Mhm.
hopefully make it great.
Mhm.
I did take something that I had already written
Mhm.
and put in and was going through
So
it, and I'm
kinda
like,
see your
this is a lot better than what I did,
right,
but it's
but
okay.
basically that's like a first draft, right?
Yeah,
Because when you're writing, like, when you're doing drafting, when you're
with your
probably
fingers.
changing things and type as you're typing it, you're probably
Yeah,
changing and editing it as you go, and you'll probably just do that,
yeah.
but you'll
I think
have
my
something to
fear
work
of
with.
dictation would be is was still is probably that I get in the middle and not know what to do, but you can always hit the pause button.
Mhm.
I mean, you can
Yeah.
always take stuff out. It's not that big a
Yeah.
deal. And
Yeah.
I figure for things that I really like a scene that I really know what's going to happen or
Mhm.
know what I want to happen, I
Mhm.
can dictate that. If I'm not real
Mhm.
sure, then I'll just
Mhm.
type it because I
Mhm.
do think when I'm typing, and
Mhm.
so
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times my dictation it's a hot mess. It's not I would never some people release their first draft
oh
dictation.
gosh, no.
I would not do that because it wouldn't make sense to people,
No.
really,
No.
because I'll have certain things going along and I'll repeat things. I'll think, "Oh, I could say that better," and I'll say new
Right.
line and I rephrase it. And
Uh-huh.
then sometimes I'll think of something and I'll say new line, insert above that she went into the kitchen before this whole scene began,
Oh,
and then I see that when I'm editing and I'm like, "Oh,
and
yeah," and
then
I
you
go
can
back
do
and
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So it's
anyway,
full of
that's what's
notes.
going on with me. You know, I'm just
That's
doing
good.
the normal stuff, y'all, just the stuff everybody else is doing.
Mhm.
And that feels good to know I'm doing the stuff everybody else is doing. Cause
Good.
for a while I haven't been. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah, that's what's
Yeah.
going on. Still doing my TikTok, still making a fool of myself daily. So there you go. There's that. It's all fun and games until your kids see it, and then whew,
And then there's feedback, right?
and then there's feedback. Oh my gosh. Well, we should get on with the show. I'm sure
Yes.
that people are sick of listening to me. So,
Well, I doubt that. We're
yeah.
all interested in what's going on.
All
Especially,
right.
I think we will follow your dictation journey.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Let's see how it goes. All right. Well,
All
here
right.
is Bev. Today, we are really excited to have Bev Feldman with us. Hi, Bev. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you both, Sarah and Jamie?
We are doing great, and we're so happy you're here.
I'm delighted to be here.
So, we are going to get into email and segmenting and all that stuff. But first, let me read your bio. Bev Feldman is a KIT, formerly ConvertKit consultant and email marketing strategist at Your Personal Tech Fairy. Her approach to email marketing is grounded in consent and human connection while also keeping things streamlined and simplified. Though much of her time is spent in the digital world, Bev's an analog girl at heart, preferring reading physical books over ebooks and doing jigsaw puzzles.
My grandkids love jigsaw puzzles, all 6 of them, and I hate it when they bring them
Oh.
out. I'm like, I'm so bad at them.
My 11-year-old has never been a big jigsaw puzzle fan, but my 7-year-old is really into it. So it's mostly her and I who do it
Yeah,
together. And she's
yeah.
quite adept at
Yep. It's
I'll
fun
let them do
how
it.
fast they can pick it up, they really kinda can pick it up and get a feel for it. It's really amazing. Well, tell us how you got into helping authors with email and tech.
Yeah. So it's kind of a long, windy journey that started with me having a jewelry business, but also doing a lot of blogging. And it's funny because actually I sometimes forget that I did this, but like through blogging, I self-published, not a fiction book, but I self-published a guide on creativity for moms, and I also had a chapter in a book, like an anthology, like, so long ago, I barely remember it. It was through learning having a business and realizing I needed to learn how to market my business that I started to get really into email marketing, and, through many twists and turns, I eventually, because of my own experience using the technology, so using Kit specifically,
Mhm.
realized it was something I really enjoyed doing, and I wanted to be able to support other people who, they wanna focus on their craft. So, for authors, you wanna be able to focus on writing and don't necessarily want to learn technology. Some do, but most just wanna work on their craft, understandably.
Mhm.
So, that's where I come in.
Yeah. I think that's great because you have the perspective of a business owner, so you understand what the challenges are for us. So I think that's a good starting point. Do you do you have any aspirations to write fiction?
It's funny because I feel like before this year, it had never really crossed my mind, but then I started to dive into The Artist's Way, which it's a book I'd had for
Mhm.
eons, and then finally I was like, "No, let me try it." And as I do a lot of I do a ton of writing as a business owner, and I really enjoy it. And this year I was like, I think it could be a lot of fun to write fiction. And I actually had signed up through my local adult education center for a weekly fiction writing class, and I was so excited, but then I think I was the only person who enrolled, so it got canceled, and I was really bummed out.
Oh, no.
That's so sad.
I know, but you know what? I actually fiction writing, I think, was the only kind of writing I enjoyed as a kid, and I haven't really done it in so long, but periodically, I'll look through some old paper. I've saved, like, just a handful of papers from
Mhm.
over the years, and I was like, I was actually better than I gave myself credit for. So, I think it'd be a lot of fun. I don't have any aspirations to publish per se, but I think just
Yeah.
having the creative outlet would be a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
having the creative outlet. Yep, exactly. Well, what do you wish authors knew about what you do?
Okay, so I guess I wish that they knew is you already have this incredible ability to write. And I think sometimes people get into that mindset of writing, especially if it's writing fiction versus writing like newsletters or writing an
Right.
email. I think we get a little bit in our heads because it's like, oh, I have to use this as a tool to sell, but I don't want to annoy people. And like we just get so caught up in it instead of just being like, let me just use this as another creative outlet for my
Right.
writing. And
Mm.
that can be such a powerful tool for connecting with people who might resonate with what we write anyway. So I think just going into it, and I recognize I do the tech side of things, but I have noticed over the years for people just from working with so many people with email marketing that sometimes the marketing piece of it can get really in their heads, and then they're almost afraid to send out emails. They're like, "Ah,
Mhm.
Right,
annoy people? What if I come off as salesy?" But it's like, you also want people to read your books,
right,
and how are they gonna know about it if you don't tell them?
right. I think
Yeah.
for me, when I first when I first heard newsletter, I back in my 20s, I was the activities director at an apartment complex, and part of my job was to send out a newsletter to the apartment, and it was like, it had multiple columns, and all of this stuff, and I was like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it." And what I realized was it's just a conversation, and it's not
It's not so
news of the
corporate or
day
formal, right?
Yeah.
necessarily. Yeah, it doesn't have to be earth-shattering. It's just a conversation
Mhm.
and a vehicle to get your books in front of your readers.
I love how you said that. It really is very much just a conversation, like, looking at it as if you're writing a letter to a
Mm,
good friend.
yeah,
Maybe you're sharing a little tidbit from your day. I
yeah,
mean, it doesn't even have to be necessarily just about your writing. It can be about what's going on in your day-to-day life. I mean, I write emails about emails. I some
yeah.
And you still have things to say, right?
and, like, I don't just write about the act of email marketing automation. I bring in in a way that feels comfortable for me, like
Yeah.
talk about some things going on in my life. Because that's the other thing I think sometimes people think, oh, I'm writing a newsletter. I have to share all this personal information. And you absolutely do not. I see lots of
No.
people do emails really well where they share minimal information about their personal lives, but maintain that personal feeling to it. And I see people much more comfortable sharing things about their personal lives. And you
Mhm.
just feel like you're getting to know that person a little bit more,
Right.
regardless of how much detail they share about their life.
Mhm.
Right.
And even if they don't share a whole lot, which I don't tend to share a whole lot of like what's going on day to day, but your readers and you share this common interest in your books, your genre, and you can connect over that and get and dig into that. That's what I tend to do. Or, if there's movies coming out that are related to your book or something like that, or
Mm.
similar would be similar appeal.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and let's not forget we're fiction writers. Like we we can make stuff up, and so if you need to make something up, you can make something up. I'm not saying like be deceptive, but it a little embellishment never hurt anybody is all I'm saying.
Or like, write about your favorite tea or coffee that you're drinking in the morning. Like,
Exactly.
Mhm.
give away that
Mhm.
information. It's personal, but without feeling
Mhm.
like you're giving away.
Exactly.
Uh,
Mhm.
how can you make it more exciting and tie it into what it is you do?
Yeah.
Mhm. I'm going to do a newsletter soon about this great gift that we got at Christmas. It was a variety pack of popcorn. And I was like, I didn't even know popcorn came in variety packs. And there's like purple popcorn and blue popcorn and red popcorn and
Oh,
small
fun.
popcorn and big popcorn. I was like, oh, this is so cool. So I'm going to do that in a newsletter and just, talk about that. And then I'll close, talk about some book stuff. But anything can be a newsletter, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I think if you approach it as not like, okay, well, I have to go in and sell, but like, how do I get people to look forward to
Yeah.
my emails so that when the time comes, when it's time to sell and I want to do a heavy push, people don't just feel like, oh, great, the only time I hear from so and so is when they're trying to
Mhm.
sell me on their latest book, but really like they've already established that connection with them. And and maybe this is something I'm sure we'll talk about, but I think one way we can already establish that connection is having some way that when someone comes into our world, so if we have a newsletter and people sign up for it, how can we automatically welcome them in and give them a little bit of a flavor about who we are and
Mhm.
get them excited to get those emails from us, which I know sounds a little silly. Like, who's excited about getting emails when we're all overrun from them?
Right. Right. Right.
But you don't need to get everyone excited about receiving your emails, but you just need those right people to get
Right.
Mhm.
excited about.
Correct.
Mhm. Well, this is a perfect transition point for talking about segmenting sequences. We were going to talk a little bit about that, get into the details. So, what would you say are the key components of an effective email sequence? Like, it's like, say, a welcome sequence or a follow up sequence. So, when somebody's purchased something, maybe
Yeah.
not necessarily the same thing, but just like what are like the big picture things you need to think about.
Yeah. So you know what? I think one of the big things because I think sometimes people think, well, how many emails should I send? What should the cadence be? But really, I think one of the most important things is about setting expectations for people on the other end. So
Mhm.
to go back to example, someone signs up for your email list and you send them some sort of automated nurturing welcome sequence. Usually those are more frequent than you might otherwise send it. So let's like in my case, for example, I send a weekly newsletter but when someone signs up for my email list, the initial sequence they get, I think it's 4 emails in like 1 a day for 4 days. And that's at a much more frequent cadence than I otherwise send. So setting that expectation right from the beginning, hey, over the next X number of days, you'll get this number of emails from me. And after that, you can expect to hear from me about once a week on Tuesdays. So that people aren't like, oh, I was excited to get that free chapter of your book. And now you're emailing me every day. What is happening?
Right.
Instead, just telling people, by the way, this is not going to happen all the time. This is just
Mhm.
you into my world. And then you can expect to hear from me less frequently.
Yeah.
That's a good point because people they might unsubscribe if they get an email every day, unless you tell them, "Hey, I'm not going to email you every single day for the rest of your life."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know people who honestly hate like business owners, I should say, like people in this space who they personally do not like getting welcome sequences. So those automated emails, so they don't do it. And I
Mhm.
totally respect. I think when it comes to doing any form of marketing, you have to do what sits right for you. And if you don't like being on the receiving end of something, I absolutely feel like you should not do it.
Mhm.
However, I will kind of push people a little bit is how can you use the technology that you have to set those expectations, send people that information, and we can get to this in a moment why I think it's so important, but also give people some agency over what the experience is like. So maybe you don't like getting welcome sequences because you don't like getting a bunch of emails right at the beginning. What if
Mhm.
someone said, here's what's going to happen, but if you don't want this, you can just click here, click this button, and you'll just get my regular weekly email. No hard feelings.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think it's something I've been talking about more because I think a lot of us don't even realize that could be an option. And a lot of the technology and certainly Kit, the one I specialize in, allows you to. The reason why I do think it's important is because let's say you send out a monthly newsletter. And so I think you have to figure out the cadence that works for you and the people who get your emails.
Mhm.
But let's say you send out a monthly newsletter, like the first Wednesday of the month, and someone signs up for your newsletter the first Thursday of the month. Suddenly, they're not going to hear from you for a whole month, at which point they may have forgotten about you. And that's
Right.
Mhm.
why I'm such a huge fan of having something automated so that when someone new comes into your world, even if you aren't actively sending people out emails that frequently, you know that they'll still get something right away
Right.
from you.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, I had on my first email, like, if you're not an email person, but you signed up to get the free book or whatever, that's so fine. And if you want to not get my emails, you can follow me here and you can follow me here. And that will tell you when I have a new release. And then and that way I don't have people on my email that don't want to be there. And
Exactly.
they cost money. And I don't want to pay for people if they don't want to be there and they're not going to participate.
Yeah.
Mm.
And actually, this brings up a point that circles us back to the question, what do I wish people knew? And this goes across the board. I wish authors, all people who do email marketing, understood the value of letting people go.
Mhm.
Mhm.
When I know how hard it can be to get people to sign up for your newsletter, and it
Right.
doesn't feel good necessarily when someone unsubscribes, and it doesn't feel good to make that conscious decision to let people go who aren't opening and engaging with your emails. But I think or I know for a fact, it's not good. The more people you have who are not opening your emails, it's going to have a negative impact on your emails showing up in the inboxes of the people who do in fact want to hear from you.
Right. Right.
So that is one other thing I wish people were
Yeah.
mindful of. That it's not, don't take it like it's not a personal thing. I always unsubscribe from newsletters and not because I don't find value in them, but because I don't have time.
Mm, yeah. Well, how often should authors email their list to keep readers engaged without overwhelming them?
That's a great question. And I think it's one of those things where I feel like it depends. I do find generally, well, and it's hard because I feel like for an author, you can get away with less frequently because I think many readers don't necessarily expect more frequently than that. However, I think there are ways to do it where you could experiment with more frequently to see
Mhm.
what happens. I feel like every other week at a minimum is probably a good cadence
Mhm.
just because you're keeping people engaged and reminding them who you are.
Right.
And again, it goes back to what are you writing about? How are you getting people interested? And especially if you're only writing once a month and then let's say you have a new book coming out, or maybe you have new book coming out. I know some authors write a whole bunch of books at once and then
Mhm.
have like you release it, in pretty short proximity. And so then
Mhm.
suddenly every time you send an email, it's just about your latest book.
And
And
that can get a little overwhelming because it
Yeah.
seems like you're just constantly saying, here, this is a new thing for you, which people are excited about. But at the same time, sometimes they can't keep up and then they feel overwhelmed and then they probably just unsubscribe because they don't want that bad feeling of, oh, I'm behind.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I I know it's not a good answer, but I like to give nuanced and not blanket one size fits all advice. So I think it depends so much on, what's the frequency with which your books are coming out, what feels right to you, and I would push you to maybe do it a little bit more than I think you should. I won't say you should do it every day. That might
Yeah.
be a lot but you know what? That also could work for some people.
Mhm.
Some people write a chapter every day or, they have daily subscriptions that they send out. So you could just send a quick note and say, hey, chapter's up. Hope you
Mm,
enjoy it. Let me know what you thought. I mean, you could even do something like that.
Yeah.
right.
Of course, you have to have the content to talk about, which Jamie and I write very slowly. So we don't do those.
I am like I said, I don't write fiction, but I am a very slow writer myself, so I totally get it.
Well, what about segmenting your list? Some people probably will have never done this, and other people are more advanced. So, what are your thoughts on segmenting?
Yeah. So to go back to talking about like, okay, you've got someone new on your email list and you're welcoming them into your world with some sort of automated email sequence. I generally recommend segmenting those people out. So basically you're sending your email list, you're sending your newsletter to people who've completed that welcome nurturing sequence, and then they get automatically added. So that's kind of the bare basics. But then for authors, depending on I know it's tricky because let's say you're selling books through Amazon and you can't track that information.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So it really partially depends on what platforms you're using to sell your books. But if you have a way where people you can track who's a customer, that could be a nice way to separate out where maybe you want to offer some sort of special gift or thank you to people who are readers of yours. You know they've purchased your book, so that could be a way to segment your list. Also, people who haven't bought, that could be a good way to survey people who haven't purchased yet to learn more about them and what would be of interest to them. So, and then I feel like those are kind of the biggest ones in terms of authors. But then to go back to that example you shared, Sarah, of someone who does like a chapter a day, you might have people who are really excited to get that chapter a day. You might have other people who say, I do not want that. Just email me when the book is done. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
that could be a way to segment people out, the people who want
Sure.
that chapter a day versus the people who just want to hear when that book is completed and available for purchase.
Good thinking. Well, what about so I've been doing this for a while. I think it helps, but I'm interested in your thoughts. I say for a while. My newsletter's been very sporadic for the last 2 years, but I still have been doing it, and I see a lot of other authors doing it. So you send out let's say you send out your email on Monday, and then on 2 days later, you have an automatic resend to your unopens
Mhm.
of the same email. What do you think about that? Do you think that helps? Do you think is there something if we're gonna do it, should we do it differently? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think this is such a great question. I'm really glad you asked it, actually. There are ways to approach it that I think could
Mhm.
be more impactful for you as the author. So
Okay.
doing the simple full on resend, like, and having the resending
Mhm.
is is not necessarily it could actually be detrimental
Okay.
as the person sending the emails because if you think about it from and I think I saw someone who I follow, her name is Liz Wilcox, who's an email marketer. She has a whole wonderful membership about email marketing. But she talks about this specifically. And as she points out, is that okay, you've sent this email,
Mhm.
you are sending it again to a less engaged
Mm.
segment
Mhm.
of your newsletters, and it looks exactly the same. So how's that gonna look to Google, to Gmail, to Yahoo, to, Outlook? Basically, it's gonna look like if you do that too frequently, you might start to send that signal like you're spam because people are not
Yeah.
engaged in your
Yeah.
emails. So I'm not opposed to it per se, but I think there's better ways to approach it. One, giving it more than a couple days because I know for myself, I have certain newsletters that I don't go through that inbox every day. Try to do it like once a week. And I've seen some people who I constantly get the resend email. And I'm like, I just haven't had time to read it yet. And then two, if you're going to do it, so give it a little bit more than a few days. And also try changing the subject line.
Okay.
Because there's
Yeah,
something about
I
the
do
subject
that too.
line. Yeah. And then also you keeping maybe the content overall, like the crux of what it is you're talking about the email the same, but maybe change up some of the content a little bit so it doesn't look like you're sending the exact same
The
thing.
exact same email. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's great advice. Yeah. What are some of the common mistakes authors make in their email sequences and how can we avoid them?
Okay, here's for anything automated, I
Mhm.
think assuming you set it up once and then, okay, I wrote it, never gonna touch that again, it's already there. But things change, like, maybe you're talking about your bestseller from 5 years ago, but you have a new bestseller. Why not
Right.
highlight the newer one? I mean, not to say you have to forget about the old one, but things change. Maybe what you write about changes, like, just comes to my head, I'm a big Ellen Hilderbrand fan, and she's, like,
Mhm.
basically done with the style of books that she's been writing about for
Mm.
a couple decades. So she just left her email sequence, like, I don't her welcome sequence. I have no idea what Ellen Hilderbrand does for her email stuff. But let's say she's like, "Here's the books I write about," but now she's totally pivoted in what type of writing she does. Like, I think she's
Yeah.
kind of hired her old style. It's gonna look weird to people.
Mhm.
They're like, "That's not what you write about." Maybe you wrote about it in the past. So thinking about, like, anything that's automated, you still wanna check it periodically, either
Yeah.
content because maybe something changes there, or maybe your messaging changes. You also wanna make sure your links still work because sometimes,
Right.
we
Mhm.
delete links to things and suddenly
Mhm.
now broken. So
Right.
and also, you do wanna check to see, like, how your emails are performing. So, you open something like things to look at are like your open rates and your click-through rates, but also, looking to see if you're asking for a response, are people responding to those emails that you're asking
Yeah.
for responses from?
Yeah.
If not, what can you change about it? If
Okay.
you're asking for people to click on a link and they're not, how can you change that email to try to get people to click more? So it's important to look periodically to see that they're doing their jobs.
Okay. Well, what about just overall? Like, what are the biggest mistakes you see authors making just overall with their email marketing?
I mean, honestly, I have to say that the infrequency with which a lot of right is honestly for my unless here, let's say if you are like a New York Times bestseller, you can get away with very infrequent emails because you already like have that name recognition. But like most of us are not going to be New York Times bestseller,
Mm-mm.
you know.
Mhm.
Like so, realizing that it's okay to email more frequently. I would say, not necessarily. I would say probably not following. A mistake would be to follow what the big name authors are doing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Or maybe a store. Sometimes stores will email you every day and they have a whole marketing department setting these up. And then they have tons of products. And if you only have a book or two, you can engage about your writing life, but you can't sell that book every week
Yeah,
to the same
yeah,
people, right?
Yeah.
yeah. I would say don't model yourself after the e-commerce businesses
Yeah.
which email very frequently. But
Hmm. Yeah.
most authors are not gonna do that.
Do you have anything that you see people doing that they think that they must do, but then it's not really producing results? Since you work with a lot of different people, you might have a different perspective.
Yeah, I th it's so hard because what works for one person may fall
Hmm.
completely flat for another person, and there's no clear reason why.
Right.
And so I would say that to find out what works, you have to be open to experimentation. You have to be open to the fact that some things are just gonna fall flat for you,
Right.
even if it worked for your best author friend.
Right.
Hmm.
There might not be a good reason why it d
Right.
it worked for them and fell flat for you. So,
Hmm.
I realize
Okay.
that that's like kind of a non-answer, but I've just from my own personal experience, I've just seen how something can work so well for one person and just not work at all for someone else.
Right.
Yeah. Let me pick your brain for a minute. I've thought of a couple of questions that come up that are best practices. and I'd like to get your feedback on them. So people say, don't send pictures, don't put a lot of pictures in your emails. So what do you think about that? Because I tend to not follow that rule. I
Yeah,
put a lot of pictures in mine.
yeah, I am all for photos. I think again, it's another thing to experiment with. You could even try could be a great way to try with segmentation, like split your email list in half and experiment and see what happens if half of the list gets the
Uh-huh.
email with lots of photos and one doesn't. I will say though, where see people go wrong with that is just uploading an image with no, and then put it like kind of having an image with text overlay,
Mhm.
which won't load you like a lot of inboxes now, you have to press that click to show the image. So otherwise you just see a blank email.
Oh.
I know a lot of e-commerce brands do that more so.
Mhm.
And then more so than like authors. But so I would say
Mhm.
if you're going to send images, make sure you're also using the text portion of your email marketing software
Mhm.
and to
Mhm.
also put in what's called to write in the alt
Oh,
description,
okay. Yeah.
because you have to remember that not everyone, some people use screen readers. So this is really for accessibility reasons. So make like even
Mhm.
if it's a description, let's say you're putting a picture of your book cover, describing what it looks like, both for people who use screen readers, but also for the very reason that a lot of these inboxes aren't gonna necessarily show the image to begin with. So
Yeah.
that at least
Mhm.
people can get a little sense of what that image is that they're not initially seeing.
Mhm. Okay, cool. Yeah. And another thing that I thought of was split testing subject lines. Do you
Mhm.
have any any tips first on subject lines, like how to write a good
Yes.
email subject line?
I'll answer the second question, I guess, first about
Okay.
tips about lines. Honestly, I think a lot of times we put a lot of stock into subject lines and not enough stock into the value of our name showing up in people's inboxes, which just goes back to the point if we email too infrequently.
Right.
Mhm.
Because I have people who show up in my inbox very regularly and I barely pay attention to the subject line. It's just I see their name
Oh.
and I say, I'm
Mhm.
going to open their email.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to happen a lot too with authors. For those people who love your books, they're not going to
Mm.
care what that subject line is.
Right.
It could make a difference for people who are new to your world. Again, like I referenced Liz Wilcox earlier. I'd heard her on a podcast and talk about an experiment she was doing with just doing one word subject line. So I was like, I'm going to try that too. And it's actually been a fun exercise to see. And I think it actually has kind of kept my open rates the same. So it hasn't like hurt it and it hasn't like necessarily helped it. But one thing to also think about is you have the subject line, but you also have the preview text line. So a lot
Mhm.
of people don't remember that that's an option, and it's just gonna by default, it will often just show the first few like, the first bit of text in the body of your email, with, of
Mhm.
course, now AI changing things. So I think changed it so that it may use AI to pull up a description, the preview text. No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So a little variety then. They're thinking that they don't want to just copy it exactly.
Yeah, so I think they kind of use AI to, like, figure out what the topic of the email is about. I don't have an iPhone, so I can't speak about it from personal experience. I've only seen a couple people write about it in their own newsletters,
Mhm.
Mhm.
because I think people tend to freak out when any big tech changes happen, and I'm just
Oh,
like, "It is what it is," you know? Like,
we'll
Mhm.
adapt. We've adapted. Yeah.
yes, but it just goes to show, again, that it's your name showing up in people's inboxes that's gonna have, like, the biggest impact.
Yeah.
And then, Sarah, to go back to your first question within that questions about A/B testing for subject lines. So, the thing to keep in mind with that is you have to have a pretty sizable email list. I think for it to be effective, I feel like it has to be a minimum of a few thousand people, maybe ideally more than 10,000. So, my guess is most of the people listening are not going to have, and I say this with,
We don't we don't need to worry about it
yeah,
basically,
I
right?
would yeah, I would just focus on writing a high quality email, and by high quality meaning like something that's engaging.
Okay.
And then from there you can try to write an engaging subject line and see what happens.
Yeah.
But maybe we don't need to stress ourselves out over that. Maybe it's just more important to have the good content and to
Exactly.
send
Yeah.
it when people are expecting it.
This has been awesome, and we're coming to the end. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to make your pitch for email marketing? Like,
Yeah.
why should we do it?
Why should we do email marketing? So, you know, I think a lot of us for marketing rely both, especially for authors, you rely a lot on, my guess is on social media, which makes
Mhm.
total sense.
Yeah.
And social media is constantly changing. The algorithms seem to change every day. And we have no control over what content of ours is going to show up in other people's feeds. So even if
Right.
people actively choose to follow us there, they might not see our content. And
Correct.
even with all the changes, you're you're not at the mercy. Like your email, unless you're doing something really egregious and your emails go to spam or don't get delivered at all, they're at least going to show up in people's inboxes.
Right.
So people may still choose not to open them, but at the very least, they're going to land there.
Mhm.
So for me, that's the biggest reason. It's information also that you control.
Yeah.
So, Meta decides one day you did something that was against their terms of service, and now you don't have access to your Instagram account.
Mm.
Don't have that information versus you are not happy with your email marketing software, you take that information and just move it elsewhere. Like you can't take information from Instagram to Facebook, but you can take your information from one email marketing software to another.
Correct. Very good. Very
Good
good.
points.
Well, tell everybody where they can find out more about you and all your good information.
Yeah. So I think the best way to find me and to stay connected is to sign up for my newsletter, which
Mhm.
you can access at yourpersonaltechfairy.com/newsletter. Yes, it is an email. It's a newsletter about emails, but I've also had multiple people tell me they love reading my emails. So
Mhm.
I think I do a decent job of making email marketing fun and engaging and with a teeny weeny bit of storytelling involved
Yeah.
as well.
Very good.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
good.
And so if people have questions specifically about Kit, that's kind of your area of expertise, right? They can get in touch with you and find out how you can
Yes.
help them.
Any kind of technical questions about Kit, I'm your person. I can also talk more broadly about email marketing. I do have familiarity with MailChimp and some of the other email marketing softwares, but Kit is my sweet spot.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for being here
Yes,
and giving us some insight and some tips. We appreciate it.
me
Thank you
too.
for having me, Sarah and Jamie.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. We will have the links that you mentioned in the show notes, and they will be at wishidknownforwriters.com. And if you found value from the podcast and would like to support us, you can go to that same link/support. And we'll see everybody next week.
All right,
Bye.
bye-bye.